Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Sean Lang. Now, I've spent the last several years building and operating a digital agency that's grown past 50 people, which has definitely shaped how I think about the decisions that really matter once things get complex. And that's always earlier than we expect. Today, I'm joined by Nikki Lindgren, founder of Pennock. Now, Pennock is a paid media and SEO agency for beauty and lifestyle brands growing their D2C businesses. Nikki, it's so great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Absolutely. So let's just start out by why don't you tell us a bit more about Pennock?
Yeah. The summary you gave was great. We're really in the space of helping brands that are beauty first and some lifestyle brands grow their e-commerce revenue. And it really focuses on a couple of growth channels. We do paid media management, we do creative briefing and creative strategy for paid media, and we do SEO. TikTok affiliates is our newest service, just because TikTok affiliates is such a critical point of TikTok ads working seamlessly. So that's what we do for about 30 brands at any given time, to help them grow primarily their e-commerce sales on their Shopify store.
Fantastic. I always love to ask. It can be two different questions, or it could also be the same question. How did you get started, or maybe more, why did you just decide to start an agency?
Yeah. So my entire professional career was really in e-commerce marketing. I started with then it was called Cost Plus World Market. You might know the brand now is World Market. They're a furniture and home goods space. I started as a member of their founding e-commerce team back in the day when I was very, very junior and really learned a ton of skills at just building and growing an e-commerce brand from a brick and mortar store that had a ton of awareness nationally. So it was a really fun time for me. I pivoted that into agency work. So I went to work for a really cool turnkey agency that helped entertainment brands build a product assortment and then sell and market it. And then I did a couple more roles in house where I was choosing agency partners to help with the efforts we had for our e-commerce business. So I just felt like the moment where I was laid off because my wearable technology company based in China was ceasing their US operations, and I was pregnant with my third child. I was like, you know what? I've always thought I had a different edge or approach to how agencies should collaborate with brands. And so I'm just going to go out and do this. It started as a consultancy for a couple of years where I had a few freelancers help me with bits and pieces of work, very few clients at the time. And then as soon as we had enough client revenue coming in to justify full-time staff, we made that change, which occurred in 2020, right before the pandemic started, which was, I guess, a great time for us in e-commerce, but
Hmm.
a risky time to be officially kicking off a business. And that's sort of how I got here. We were doing a little bit of more marketing channels, I guess, when we started the collective before it was an agency. So we were doing email, we were doing organic social, and a few other parts of marketing that just didn't really fit the profile of our full-time staff once we developed the agency. So we cut our services down to really my specialty, growing up the marketing ladder, and then hired appropriately for people to have the great paid media SEO and affiliate management skills.
Very cool. There's so many jumping off points here, so many questions I could ask, but maybe the most obvious one for me to ask in this current moment is, um, what was the transition like going from consultancy to agency? Because I find that it's generally kind of a natural transition, but they're also very, very different.
Yeah, well, and I have to remind you, this is like I was doing the consultancy like 2018 to 2020. And at the time, finding freelancers was really kind of, at least my knowledge at the time, was like Upwork or Fiverr. And so I found some great supporting staff, but I was so nervous about how committed they were to the work. Were they going to meet deadlines? Some of them didn't even show up to client calls, and I wasn't like prepped on what needed to be led during the calls. So it just felt like I was nervous, and the energy I was like, you know, putting out there into the world for my agency or my collective at the time was just not the headspace I wanted to be in. So that was one of the reasons why I was like, I want these people to be full time. I want them to be committed to working for me and in this with me. So that was like the kickoff of like, okay, our retainers are enough now. I can afford it. What I didn't then know is how to really hire well. I had hired in my in-house roles and agency roles for other companies in the past, but everything just became so personal when I did it for myself, and being a bootstrapped service business, like a service business probably shouldn't lose money, right? But there were months where we were losing money. And so my first couple of months and year, I would say, running the agency, I was really combative and kind of difficult to work with because every time my team took too long, in my opinion, solving something, I'm like, I am literally losing money at the end of the month because of this work. So it was just a really turbulent and chaotic time for me to kind of like come to that realization. And I put it out on some of the team members, which I should not have done as the founder. So there was a lot of like early learnings in terms of just how to calm my nerves, how to kind of keep the team engaged, and a lot of missteps in those early days.
Yeah, feeling every dollar that leaves your wallet or leaves your bank account definitely changes how it all feels, right? Um, and for some people, I find that never changes, but I think often you eventually get used to that. The first year, especially, is where you're really watching every single dollar like a hawk, and you have this emotional connection to the money because
Yeah.
it's never been the business's money; it's always been your money up until now. And I mean, you eventually start to understand that like just because the money's in the business doesn't mean that it like I'm the steward of it, but it's not really my money. It's it's the
Yeah.
business's money. Um, and that can spider off into a million different rabbit trails. But I'm going to get us back on track here. I really want to understand because you had a few interesting experiences prior to the consultancy and the agency. One being working actually directly in e-commerce. How did that affect your approach to running an agency or the services that you provide?
Yeah, I think, like, my big aha and or, like, concern with working with agency partners is, I just didn't feel like they were close enough to my business and understood, like, the ins and outs of what was going on, and in fact, sometimes, like, they didn't even understand what our top selling SKUs were at any given time, and that just really irked me that they weren't more invested. Now being on the other side, you know, I can understand a little bit more why that can be for like the smaller clients, et cetera. But really what I wanted to bring to the fold with starting Pennock was a truer, more collaborative extension of the business. And so that started with just like really asking questions about other marketing channels that would impact what we're doing, and some of like the more obvious stuff. But I think as the years have gone on, it's been more about the responsibility of making sure the business is profitable and the efforts we're doing are not derailing the company's ability to be profitable. We're working with, again, these early stage businesses. And so a lot of them, the next thing they want to do, especially in beauty, is enter Ulta or Sephora. And many of these brands need to make sure e commerce is really well oiled and productive from a profit margin perspective to then be able to justify the expense of going into retail. So that's a lot of what we're looking at on a daily basis now is just like not only how are the paid media or SEO metrics looking or affiliate metrics looking, but overall, is that contributing well to the state of the e-commerce business? And does it have power to continue to kind of grow in efficiency, whether that's contribution margin or just MER, some level of awareness around what's going on for the full business, not just our line items?
Yeah, I really appreciate that sort of higher level holistic approach. I think that one thing that a lot of agencies get very wrong is they get so hyper fixated on the deliverables that they're providing, or maybe the one platform they're on, like in a silo. When in reality, we kind of need to zoom out and understand that at the end of the day, these clients have overarching goals, and we actually need to understand what those goals are and how what we're doing contributes to that, and not just kind of lives in a vacuum. Because I mean, we could potentially do something for a client that is hyper successful in a on a small little island, but if that actually doesn't contribute to the overall goal that the client wants to achieve, then like is there actually any value there at all? Those
I
are some
think the
big learnings
perfect
for us.
example for like the paid media lane is okay, a client wants really high ROAS. Great, I'm going to do brand search and a ton of bottom of funnel remarketing stuff. I can get a great ROAS then, and the client will be happy because like the ROAS is higher than it's ever been in its entire life. But the MER might be totally shot because we're just, talking to the same people over and over who don't want to buy that often. So I think those are like the things that if you're not balancing the whole business when you're looking at, strategic moves, then yeah, you can game the system temporarily, but it's usually, comes at a huge cost down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. What was valuable about your previous agency experience that you were able to sort of bring into your own agency?
Yeah, I loved working at this other agency. So one, it was just like the memory of kind of like the best time of my career prior to starting this agency, and the energy and kind of always on mentality that would come with doing it. So I think that those were probably the main things that I enjoyed about working on the marketing team at a large agency or a larger agency. And then I think just kind of like the professionalism that comes with being on this side of the fence was something I always enjoyed. It felt a little bit less laid back than being brand side. So those are the things from my own personal memory that I knew I would enjoy about coming this way. Now when it comes to like hiring and staffing, I do think we see the best results from team members if they have agency experience. Ideally, someone with brand and agency experience, which many people do have, is a slam dunk for us. But oftentimes, if we can choose either brand or agency, we would choose a candidate with agency experience just so they understand the pace.
Yeah, that was a key learning for us early on is understanding the pace and sort of the context and also really the intense need for really, really good communication. Because when you have so many people involved in the process, if you come from a small scrappy team or brand side, you're not necessarily used to making sure that everybody has all the information that they need. And then
Right.
of course those gaps surface in client calls when the client says something and you're like, "What? I
Right.
have no idea what you're talking about." We have a communication issue. Definitely a huge thing to look for sure. So how long has Pennock been around for now?
Yeah. So we're on our seventh year. So we've, kind of a long time in my opinion. I don't think I've had a job this long ever in my career as the, managing partner of what I'm doing today.
Yeah, that's definitely a solid amount of time for an agency. A lot of agencies generally last a couple years and then shut down. So congratulations, that's awesome. Um,
Thanks.
over the last 7 years, what's sort of a standout challenge that the agency went through that you came out of on the other side?
Yeah, I think a lot of it probably boils down to some level of communication of a strategy, right? I think to the point you just made is, we typically have a lot of data. Sometimes clients will say too much data. And it does feel that way when there isn't a through line or a story to weave through the data. And so I think a learning is just making sure we're giving recommendations. We're creative briefing our clients every month or every quarter, depending on their creative calendar. And what the clients don't want to hear at this moment in time, 2026, is a get ready with me hook, a before and after, a frequently asked questions. They're like, how does that speak to the core personas we're going after? So, really, the positioning of this is the hooks or the concepts we want to go with for next month, next quarter, and here's the data to back it up, and it bubbles to said persona is really the story people expect, brands expect an agency to put together. And I think we had really good data practitioners and media buyers at times in our past, but they were maybe not great at figuring out how to give that 30,000 down to like 3 foot view of the breakdown.
In terms of the agency story or the agency journey, can you kind of walk us through maybe one of the most difficult times that you had to get through as an agency founder?
Yeah, I mean, there was a moment where we had two major clients who were probably contributing to not a huge, well, maybe kind of a huge number. Maybe like 60% of our revenue at one given time was coming from two clients, so roughly 30% per. And one of the clients was really rocky, like highs and lows, and it was really unpredictable where the marketing team of that brand was going to be that day, and was it a good day or a bad day? And they were actually really guarded about their business. So there were more unknowns we had as a partner of theirs than we have today with most of our partners. So it was really challenging. And I remember an early team member come to me and say, if you don't fire this client, you're going to have a ton of turnover here because no one enjoys working with them. And I'm in
Mm,
this position where I desperately needed the brand to continue to have positivity as an agency, and cover payroll and our expenses. And I didn't have someone to like backfill it. So it was sort of that like keeping the team happy and the waiting game of just getting those new clients in. And it would need to be probably multiple clients to cover, how big that client was for us. So I think that was like a really challenging time. And I think the lesson is I'm very glad that we haven't had, I think like right now our biggest clients concentration is maybe like 15% of our total revenue. So that feels healthier and we're, in a better position should any of our clients leave. So it's just like a high pressure period for us. We ended up letting that client stay with us until they wanted to leave because we were struggling to find that replacement. And it was an up and down relationship for the first duration. And then surprisingly, like 6 months later, they came back and said, okay, we need to work with you again.
Hmm.
And that, we gladly took again for the money. But that too was a similar tumultuous relationship.
Yeah, that's a really, really relatable struggle that I think most agencies go through. I can think of our agency definitely having struggles like that in the past as well. And it can feel like such a huge win when you first sign that big gorilla of a client. But if you're not careful and if client concentration does become a risk, then you do find that you start to go way above and beyond the scope just to keep them happy, and you start to develop this weird almost dysfunctional relationship where you are, in an unspoken way, you are actually just kind of like the marketing team of that agency or of that
Yeah.
brand, which of course then your employees really start to feel the pressure of that and possibly the resentment as well, and it definitely does contribute to potential turnover, which a huge risk. But of course, in the moment, you never really think about all those downstream steps. You're just like, whatever it takes to get this client, whatever they want, we'll do it. We need to have their logo. We need to have their revenue.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a year down the line, it's not always the best decision, but very very
Yeah.
common.
Exactly.
Um, how does Pennock acquire new business?
Yeah, so we have been fortunate enough, I suppose, that a lot of it comes from referrals. So we haven't done a ton of our own pipeline building beyond referrals, which is why we're still very boutique in nature, just 11 full time staff members. Um, we have been exploring different ways of getting ourselves out there at a higher degree than we did in previous years. So we'll see how that all comes together. It's a little bit of potentially speaking at conferences, going to a couple of shows, sponsorship placements on podcasts and/or newsletters, case studies that are pay to play for different publications to kind of prove our work in verticals. And then, of course, some like cold outreach on LinkedIn and email, which always gives me a little bit of the ick, but the experts in the space say eventually it should work.
Yeah, I've never fully agreed with email. I know that it should work and I know that it does work, but I've always found that if you can put more effort into building a one-on-one connection and also creating inbound, I find that those clients are just so much better than the ones that will, decide to
Yeah.
book a meeting with you from an email blast. For whatever reason, the people and again, this is my experience. So there might be somebody listening being like, "No, Sean, you're completely wrong." But I probably am. But in my experience, the clients that book a meeting from the email blast, they seem to need so much more convincing. And I
Oh,
find
good.
that I find that if you try to convince someone to come on and then you start to work with them, you feel like they're still not really convinced. And then you're in this uphill battle where it's for the next like 3 to 6 months, you're like, no, you made a good decision. No, I swear you made a good decision. We're
Yeah.
providing you good ROI. You made a good decision. And that's never really a nice dynamic to have versus when they are super excited to come on board. They're super excited to work with you. They've consumed all of your content. They know exactly what your approach is for X, Y, and Z. Two very different approaches, and clearly you can tell which one I put all of my
Yeah.
eggs in versus versus the other one. But yeah, for sure. Um, okay, what's something that you think you would tell yourself when you were just starting out, knowing what you know now?
Wow. Well, I remember so vividly the moment I sat down and like put together the spreadsheet of my own agency projections and I walked my husband through it who's been a huge support of, the work I've been doing at the agency and we were just like, yeah, this looks great. But then I think as and those projections were very ambitious, let's just say, right? Like I didn't get there in the timeline that that initial plan depicted. So I think the thing I would tell myself in the early days is like still stay ambitious with your goals, but make sure the reality of what you're doing every day is driving you towards that goal. I think I was very good in the early days of micromanaging the team, maybe to the point of exhaustion. So I was not I wanted them to have a perfect product, so I think that part of the early days of micromanaging was important because I wanted everything to look and feel a certain way, but I was so fixated on that, I almost forgot about the growth lever, and that's where, you know, those initial projections that I remember so vividly, fell apart, was I was just focused on retaining the clients we had more so than figuring out how to build pipeline.
I do want to say that, retention is a very, very important piece. And I think that a lot of agency owners, agencies in general, do end up focusing an inordinate amount of their time on growth, and then you have this leaky bucket. So I think it's really, really important to focus on retention. But if you have retention down, then of course the next obvious
Right.
choice is now, okay, so how do we grow this?
Yeah.
Um, and most people do that
I
backwards.
mean, I think I was in a mastermind, or I have been in a mastermind now for maybe 3 years, and I think, first year, so, like, really 3, 4 years into running the agency, I still had clients who would freak out if I wasn't on calls and, like, didn't
Mm.
present something to them, right? Like, I was very much a critical ingredient of every relationship, and the mastermind was like, you know, "Get out of the day-to-day operations, like, you can't be so necessary for your business to run," and I was like, "In what world?" And so it finally feels good to be on the other side where I do have much less interaction with clients. However, I think there's this balancing act because we are small and boutique, and so to be completely removed from all of the operations probably feels a little bit of a bait and switch because it is such a small team. I think our clients probably do expect hearing from me. So I think that's the balance. I feel like in the last quarter, I was maybe a little too removed. So I have to figure out how to make time to be a little bit more in the client conversations.
Yeah, there's definitely kind of a push and pull there. I can remember the first time that I decided to offload all of my clients to one of our account managers, and I remember just waiting and waiting for like the bad news that they all quit and they all left, and they didn't. Did things go as smoothly as when I was managing? Probably not. But we worked through that. But it definitely requires, sort of like a plan and sort of a transition. What I found is that if you can make sure, and this can be kind of difficult, but if you can make sure that the incoming, client relationship person or the account manager, if they start to provide more obvious value to the client than you do, then eventually the client doesn't even notice that you're gone. Because
Right.
Sean hasn't said anything that I really care about for a long time, but Jennifer over here, she's been kind of my girl for like the last 2 months now. So yeah, Sean, yeah, well, I'll check in with you later on email, but Jennifer's got it. Versus
Yeah.
if you're like, okay, all right, well, I'm gone. Now you have Jennifer. Hope it works out. That's when the clients are like, are we going to sink? Are we going to swim? It's definitely kind of like a delicate balance. And there are always a few, like one or two clients they're just so connected to you that, like if I step out of this, we might be saying goodbye to the relationship, and then you have to like make that
Right.
judgment call. Like, is this worth it?
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. And I can relate to everything you're saying there.
It's the constant struggle. One thing that I really like to focus on now more than ever, when talking about the agency journey is like we always like to talk about how the agency has changed, and clearly the agency is an ever changing beast. It's like the ship of Theseus, where you're replacing one board at a time. And is it the same ship anymore? Yeah, probably not. It's probably 5 or 6 iterations removed. But the one thing that we always kind of forget is that like the agency is kind of a reflection of the founder. So like how have you changed, or how have you needed to change, as a founder, in order to kind of get to this point? Because 7+ years is a long time to be in the game, and a long time to be like thriving in the game. So what does that look like for you?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, so many layers to unpack there. I think the first that I would probably say is the financial responsibility of the clients. And so our goal of making sure we aren't just fixated on our channels has been a good evolution to get to. I still think there's a ways to go there. I think I can probably articulate it better than a lot of our account managers. So I think, a potential misstep or opportunity I've had is I have these ideas. I'll kind of like quick shoot them out to the team, but the team hasn't really fully internalized it, nor do they have the tool set to really speak to it super eloquently to the client. So I think that's where we've evolved, but obviously just called out a miss or an opportunity on our part. And I think just like having a little bit more grace and patience with the team, right? Like, I think in the early days, I was like, well, I know all these things. Why doesn't my team member know all these things? And just like realizing where everyone's coming in and their background and the training we had or didn't have for them when they onboarded in certain areas. So I think just having a little bit more grace and patience there has been a big unlock for me. In a lot of ways, we've calmed the nerves of our team members. And I think another tactic that I unfortunately had to deploy was fewer direct reports working for me so that I could kind of let my team, who is maybe a little better at the soft skills, get it out to the rest of the staff in a way that was going to land with each of those individuals because I tend to be pretty blunt and it doesn't always land super well with the team. So those are the unlocks. I mean, I think the clients really like the bluntness because when I do show up, I'm really just going to kind of speak to what's going on and what the next step is, where our team is much more finessed there, I would say. So those are kind of the things that come to my mind.
It's so important to be able to find or identify those sort of key team members on your team, people who can actually, manage and lead others. I find that you can kind of tell whether an agency is going to scale and grow or not, based on whether they have any of those people on the team or whether the founder has even taken the time to identify any of those people on the team. Because once
Yeah.
you have someone else who will take a little bit more accountability, who will work with the team one on one, it stops feeling like it's all on you. I mean, at the end of the day, accountability wise, it is still all on you, but you start to feel like you have like your first in command. And I remember when we first had that feeling when we were kind of building like a preliminary leadership team, it was kind of like, wait, why did we wait so long to do this? Like we could have done this years ago, and the last 2 years would have been so much easier even if these people would have taken 15% of what we were doing, like that would have been huge. So I think I think agency owners, like we generally start an agency because we're a specialist first. And so we're not
Mhm.
necessarily good at the people side of things as much as we're good at the practice, at the craft. So I will call it, and obviously this is something you've worked on, but I will call out that that is one of the necessary changes that the agency owner needs to make through the lifestyle or the life cycle of the agency in order to take it to the next step is like really understand, okay, like I don't need to work on craft. Craft, we're good at craft. I really need to work on people. People is kind of it's
Yeah.
the cliche now, but like the people are the plant. And I think that's never been more true than in the agency space where it's literally just all it is people. Like we have no
Mhm.
overhead aside from like the tools that we pay for our people to use to
Mhm.
our clients who are also people. It's just people all around, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's a really exciting time to just figure out how to properly leverage all of the advancements with AI into the stack to make sure we're using the people's time right and not wasting it on things technology can do better than us.
Absolutely. I've found that is one of the biggest opportunities right now when you are trying to level up your team and you're feeling like maybe your secret sauce is stuck in your head is you can easily use AI to get that out and to actually make tools for the team to either execute like you or think like you. And even if it's only like 80% of the way there, 80% is a lot better than 0%, right? So it's a good way to start to like up level people in almost like a passive way where they feel like they're using a tool, but after you've used that tool for a couple months, like you're going to be thinking differently. You're going to be seeing
Yeah.
things differently, right? So it's definitely high leverage. One thing I always like to ask is, um, I love to hear about work that you've done for a client that you're really proud of. Do you have any client wins that you could walk us through?
Yeah, I mean, I won't name the brand that we're working with, but we did just put together a case study for a specific industry publication to just kind of highlight work within that industry's lane. And I think like it really kind of boils back to the people that you just kind of called out, Sean, is we're not we're not doing things that another agency is incapable of doing, or, we didn't one up the last agency because we are significantly smarter, better than them at everything we do. It's just really kind of taking the time to look at their total business together and figure out where to move the needle differently than they had before. So I will say for this particular brand, we're doing all of our core services, affiliate, SEO, and paid media. And I think having those all stacked together has been a big unlock for this brand in terms of just their ability to get these businesses to, or these marketing units to speak to one another and scale together. Because our team is so small, we just have, a few individuals able to do all three of those channels collectively. So the breakdown of communication and like people showing up to calls and not knowing what the other is doing is sort of avoided at our agency. And so not only has like ROAS been growing significantly, we've been working with this brand for a year and a half now, but we're seeing great conversion rate improvements. We are not doing conversion rate optimization for them. We will consult them on things we recommend them do. But I think it's just sort of like the strategic synergies of how my team views and is really embedded into the product line and the future of this business. My team meets with this client like 3 times a week to just make sure, 2 of them are just kind of like stand-ups to make sure nothing's changing that the other teams need to know about, and the others like a proper, client status call. So I just think that's the difference maker that we've been able to bring to the fold for this client is instead of just following maybe a boilerplate, what should an agency do? What should their documents look like? We're really figuring out how to cultivate them and augment them for this particular client while not being so bespoke that the playbook doesn't apply to other brands. So I think it's like that great balancing act that we've been able to do here for this brand and then bring it into the fold for others.
Oh, it's so cool. Yeah, that's a great example. Well, Nikki, it's been great to have you on. Where can people find out more about you and Pennock?
Yeah, we are best it's best to go find us on our domain. So we're Pennock, PENNOCK.co, not .com. You can, read our blog there, see some of our tools there for calculations, and figure out how to get in touch. What we love doing is just assessing where brands are and seeing if there's any value we could add. We are very good at kind of being honest with brands who are not in a good spot for our services or are maybe doing so well where they are that it doesn't make sense to switch. So we'll give you pretty honest feedback if any brands are looking for more advice.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Nikki.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.